Greetings programs, I'm Rus McLaughlin, and this is Apparent Gaming, where I spend a few minutes telling parents a little something about their kids' video games. And here is a conversation I tend to have a lot. So I guess you work in the video game industry. Oh man, what shirt did I put on this morning? Yeah, actually, yes. Yes, I do. I do. Yeah, my kid plays a lot of video games. Oh, cool. There's one he really likes with like zombies and body parts and exploding heads and stuff. I don't know. What's the right age for that? Well, how old are they? 4th grade. I think we really lucked out with teachers. Probably the best 4th grade teacher he's ever had. But what I really want to know is there like stuff in those games? Like stuff. I mean, that's fair. What's the game's rating? Rating? You mean like movie rating? Yes. Games have ratings? Yes, they do. Games have a lot of ratings actually, and maybe I should talk about them. So there are dozens of rating boards for video games. Some countries like Saudi Arabia, Japan, and Russia have their own rating systems, while something like PEGI covers most of Europe, India, Israel, Pakistan, and South Africa, which might be the only thing all those countries have ever agreed on. But for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to be focusing on the ratings board that covers North America, the ESRB. Sorry, rest of the world. Love you, man. So the Electronic Software Ratings Board is run by the gaming industry's trade/lobby group, the Electronic Software Association, which also puts on the Electronic Entertainment Expo, and as you can probably tell, they have every acronym they'll ever require. And just like the movie industry developed the Hays Code, which evolved into its own rating system, the ESRB was the gaming industry's attempt to self-regulate before the government stepped in. In the early 90s, technology was just starting to catch up to the visions some game designers had for creating more realistic worlds, which included more realistic violence. And what could be better than that? Because if there was one thing they knew about their audience, kids, it was how much they loved anything their parents would absolutely hate. So things escalated. At the time, Capcom's 2D fighting game Street Fighter dominated the arcades with its one-on-one beat-em-ups. Midway Games answered that with Mortal Kombat, a 1v1 kill-em-up where the winner was told to finish him or her with a spine-rippingly gory fatality move. I assure you, I'm being entirely literal about the spine ripping. In fact, fatalities have become a staple of the Mortal Kombat franchise, only becoming more gory and over the top over the years. It's part of the appeal. But in 1992, this was entirely new, and parents hated it just like they were supposed to, so much so that there were Senate hearings. The United States Senate Committees on Governmental Affairs and the Judiciary held 2 days of testimony, co-chaired by Joe, sometimes a Democrat Lieberman, and Herb Kohl, heir to the Kohl department store chain, focusing on Mortal Kombat and, rather bizarrely, a cheeseball full-motion video game called Night Trap, featuring negligee and sports bra-wearing co-eds being terrorized by silent assailants dressed in what looked like hefty garbage bags. The full-motion video game era is really kind of embarrassing to a lot of people, and Night Trap is only remembered because of its prominent role in these hearings. But regardless, the video game industry quickly followed Hollywood's example. Incidentally, Joe Lieberman later ran as vice president on Al Gore's ticket in 2000, before getting drop-kicked entirely from the Democratic Party for endorsing John McCain instead of Barack Obama in the 2008 election, and Kohl's department stores now carries a wide selection of Mortal Kombat t-shirts. And so the ESRB was born. There's no law that says the games have to be rated, but it is a hard requirement by every legal department on every game platform that the ESRB badge has to be displayed prominently somewhere either on the packaging or in the electronic purchase flow before they are allowed to let you complete that purchase. But if you've never heard of the ESRB before or you don't know what the ratings mean, I'm going to fix that right now. These are the current ESRB ratings, and you don't need to memorize them all. The main 3 you need to know are E for everyone, T for teen, and M for mature. The others do show up, but not as often. C for childhood is the Teletubbies rating. These are games intended for preschoolers, and there just aren't a lot of those around that get an ESRB rating. E for everyone is the G rating. Super safe, super mild, don't need to worry about it. E10 plus for everyone 10 and up is one of the newer ratings, but you do see it more and more these days. This is where we start to get into some physical danger, some cartoon or Lego on Lego violence, and maybe some suggestive humor, but nothing approaching the level of T for teen, which is the PG-13 of the game world. This is where we start getting into depictions of violence, maybe some off-screen sex, and a bit of foul language. M for mature is the R rating. F-bombs, buckets of blood, nudity, on-screen sex, basically all the reasons you subscribe to HBO. AO is adults only, the NC-17/X rating. Only about 30 games have ever been rated AO, and not all of those even saw the light of day. Xbox, PlayStation, and especially Nintendo will not publish AO-rated games on their platforms. There's also a 7th ratings badge that basically means they haven't rated it yet. You see this one a lot because publishers routinely release trailers for their games years before the game's finished, much less gone through any sort of ratings process. And in addition to the ratings themselves, the ESRB, and indeed pretty much all the game's ratings boards, assigns a list of reasons explaining the ratings, sometimes in really stark detail. I actually had to review this list of hundreds of descriptors for a project I was on at PlayStation. We referred to it as the List of Carnage. And in recent years, the ESRB has started including other descriptors not so much as part of their rating, but as just a little warning to parents, things like in-game purchases or player-to-player interactions. And if you want all the details, the ESRB posts everything on their website. Whew, man, I feel so much better now that everyone knows how this works. So now I'm going to tell you how it doesn't work. Game apps, like what you would find on Apple's App Store or Google Play, have their own rating system and don't use the ESRB. That's in part because there is a substantial fee to get an ESRB rating, way past what most apps could possibly budget for. The ESRB also very specifically does not rate multiplayer content because they have no way to control what some jerk says over their mic. Oh, and the process for awarding that rating doesn't actually involve anyone from the ratings board playing the game. The publisher submits a written questionnaire and relevant footage from the game, and that becomes the basis for the rating. It does make a certain amount of sense if you think about it. What some might consider the most objectionable material could be missed entirely if you don't know exactly what to do. It could be a matter of a button sequence pressed over a 5-second window, or even a series of correct decisions made over 20 hours of gameplay. But either way, it does mean that the ESRB has to operate largely on the honor system. And that usually works because there are severe penalties for publishers that don't deal in good faith. But you know, video games are very complex, made up of thousands of lines of code written over the course of 3 or more years by teams that might see a lot of turnover in that time. Hello, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Grand Theft Auto is exactly the kind of game franchise the ESRB was made for. GTA casts you as a criminal doing criminal things, including violent run-ins with the law. Developer Rockstar Games takes an almost gleeful pleasure in carving sacred cows into prime rib, and that's produced some of the greatest games of the last 20 years, along with some of the most genuinely biting satire on American culture you're likely to find. GTA wears its immature rating with pride, and 2004's Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the 5th game in the franchise, which took place in a fictionalized South Central Los Angeles, was no different. But what happens sometimes when you're always courting controversy and pushing boundaries is you find yourself several steps past where you actually meant to be. At some point, someone at Rockstar coded an interactive minigame where your character had on-screen sex with his girlfriend. The in-game trigger for this was when she invited you into her house for coffee. The feature was dropped and never fully completed, but the code for it was not removed before the game shipped, and it wasn't long before data miners found it and released a mod called Hot Coffee to add it back into the game, because gamers are always going to find that stuff. They just are. And then all hell broke loose. All heck broke loose. The ESRB almost immediately re-rated San Andreas and AO, prompting a massive product recall. Congress started drafting legislation that was Joe Lieberman again and a little-known politician named Hillary Clinton. There were class action lawsuits, civil lawsuits, FTC lawsuits, and yeah, the ESRB hit Rockstar's publisher Take-Two Interactive with a lawsuit too, all of which Take-Two either lost or settled out of court to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. So people try really hard not to do that anymore. But that's an important thing to bear in mind for any rating system, whether it's for movies, music, or games, because I guarantee you a sex minigame was far and away not the only thing in Grand Theft Auto that a parent might find objectionable, or even the most objectionable. And all of those other things were called out in the ESRB rating. These are, and should be, and must be general guidelines for you to apply to your specific child. So there is always going to be some level of ambiguity when it comes to deciding whether things like strong language, blood and gore, sexual themes, strong language, drug reference, and violence are okay for your 10-year-old. And, maybe, no. But these guidelines do exist, and they're there to help you decide not only whether your kids are ready for this, but whether or not you are.